Billionaire shocked to find his mother sleeping in the tool shed. What he did next left everyone in tears. Chapter 1. The heartbreaking discovery: the flight from Singapore landed at 2:14 in the morning. Daniel Osei did not call ahead. He never called ahead when he came home from international trips anymore, not because he wanted to surprise anyone, but because he had learned, over 4 years of marriage to Renee, that announcing his arrivals generated a particular kind of performance that he had grown tired of watching. The house would be just so. The right music, the right lighting, Renee in the right clothes, composed and welcoming, the whole scene assembled for him like a stage set for a returning king. He preferred the unedited version. He had learned to be suspicious of anything too perfectly arranged. The Osei estate sat on 4.5 acres in the Fairbrook Hills neighborhood, behind iron gates and mature oak trees that his mother had planted the year they moved in 12 years ago, when Daniel had written the check for the property with the particular satisfaction of a man fulfilling a specific, long-standing promise. "When I make it, Mama, you will have a home." That had been the promise, made in the kitchen of a rented apartment in the East Side district when Daniel was 22, and their combined net worth was approximately $400 and a second-hand refrigerator. He had made it. The house existed. The promise, he had believed, was kept. His driver, Thomas, pulled through the gate at 2:31 a.m. The main house was dark, which was expected. Daniel had a key. He let himself in through the side entrance, the one off the kitchen garden, quieter than the front, and he moved through the dark hallway toward the kitchen for a glass of water before going upstairs. He was almost at the kitchen door when he heard it. A sound. Small. Furtive. The particular quality of a sound being made by someone trying not to make any sound at all, the accidental rustle of effort, the soft percussion of someone moving carefully in the dark. Daniel stopped. He stood in the hallway for 3 full seconds, listening. The sound came again from the direction of the back door, outside past the kitchen garden. Something being moved, something light. A plastic bag, maybe, or he pushed open the kitchen door and turned on the light. The kitchen was empty, but the back door was ajar by 3 inches, and through it the cold October night air moved into the room, and beyond it, in the dim light of the garden path lamp, Daniel saw the door to the tool shed, also ajar. He walked across the kitchen, through the back door, across the stone path. He pulled open the tool shed door. His mother was sitting on an overturned gardening crate, in the dark, in her nightgown and a thin cardigan that was far too light for October at 2 in the morning. On her lap was a plastic bag, a grocery bag, and in her hand was a piece of food he recognized after a moment as a bread roll. The kind that came in the plastic sleeves Renee bought in bulk and typically disposed of after 2 days because she had opinions about freshness. The bread roll was clearly not fresh. His mother, Grace Osei, 68 years old, who had raised 3 children on a hospital laundry worker's salary and kept every one of her promises, and had a laugh that had always been, in Daniel's private assessment, one of the finest sounds in the world, looked up at him from the gardening crate with the expression of someone caught doing something shameful. That was the thing that broke him. Not the bread roll, not the tool shed, not the October cold, the expression. The shame. As if she were the one who had done something wrong. "Daniel," she said, I didn't know you were Mama." His voice came out very level. He was distantly aware that this was because something had happened in his chest in the last 4 seconds that was beyond the range of regular emotional weather, something tectonic, something foundational, a shift in the bedrock of things. "What is this?" She looked down at the bread roll. She had the specific dignity of a woman who has lived her whole life with very little and is accustomed to not complaining, and watching her try to deploy that dignity in a tool shed at 2 in the morning was the single most painful thing Daniel Osei had ever seen. "I didn't want to wake anyone," she said. "The kitchen has a..." She stopped. "There's a lock on the kitchen pantry. It's new." "I didn't want to ask Renee for the lock," Daniel said. "It went in last month." Renee said it was for the household budget, so the staff didn't take things. His mother's voice was carefully neutral in a way that said everything about what she was not saying. "I have my own food in my room, but I finished it. I didn't want to bother anyone." Daniel looked at his mother on the gardening crate in the tool shed in October, and he looked at the bread roll from the trash bag, and he looked at the cardigan that was not warm enough. He crossed the shed in 2 steps and crouched down in front of her and took her hands in his. Her hands were cold. They were always strong hands. His mother had strong hands from 30 years of physical work, but they were cold from sitting in an unheated shed, and they were trembling slightly, though he understood the trembling had nothing to do with the temperature. Long? He asked. She looked at him. How long has this been happening, Mama? The shed, the food. She looked away. Daniel, you have a good life here. You have the company, and how long? She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the oak trees moved in the night wind. The garden path lamped through its small circle of light on the stones. 7 months, she said quietly. Daniel Osei remained crouched on the tool shed floor, holding his mother's cold hands, and he made no sound and showed very little expression. And inside him something that had previously been warm and ordinary and trusting became something else entirely, something cold and deliberate and very, very thorough. Every single thing, he thought. I'm going to find out every single thing. And then I am going to dismantle it. All of it. Come inside, he said. I'm going to make you something warm. He helped her up from the crate. He took the grocery bag from her hands and set it down. He put his arm around her shoulders and walked her across the stone path, through the kitchen door, and into the house he had bought for her 12 years ago and apparently needed to buy for her again. Chapter 2. The paper trail did not sleep that night. He put his mother in the main guest suite, the good one, on the east side of the house, with the en-suite bathroom and the reading chair and the view of the garden, and he made her tea and toast and sat with her until she fell asleep, which took about 20 minutes because she was exhausted in the particular way of someone who has been managing fear alone for 7 months. Then Daniel went to his study, locked the door, and began. He was by instinct and training a forensic thinker. Osei Capital, which he had built from a boutique investment advisory into a $3.2 billion asset management firm, had not been constructed through luck or charisma alone. It had been constructed through Daniel's specific ability to look at a financial structure from the outside, identify the load-bearing points, and understand exactly where the weight was resting and why. He could read a balance sheet the way other people read faces, intuitively, rapidly, with an instinct for what was being hidden as much as what was being shown. He applied this instinct now to his own household. He started with the accounts. The Osei household ran on a management account that Daniel funded monthly, a significant fund, because the estate was large and his mother had been given an allowance from it, and the household staff were paid from it. He admitted to himself in the cold clarity of 3 a.m., not looked at this account with any particular attention in the last 2 years. He had built the structure and trusted its administration to Renee, because trust was what marriage was supposed to involve. He looked at it now. The household expenses had increased by 340% over the past 14 months, not gradually. In specific, episodic jumps, each one occurring shortly after a large Osei Capital dividend payment, as if someone had been watching the inflows and timing the extractions accordingly. The spending categories were broad and self-justifying: estate maintenance, security upgrades, personal services, household staff. Every line item was plausible in isolation. In aggregate, they represented, by Daniel's rapid calculation, approximately $900,000 in 14 months that he could not map to any physical improvement or staff cost he had actually observed. That was the household account. He moved to the personal accounts. Here, it took him longer, because the architecture was more sophisticated. Someone with real knowledge of financial structures had been involved, not Renee, who was intelligent but not financially technical, but someone who had advised her. The personal accounts showed a series of transfers to 3 holding entities he did not recognize. He wrote the names down: Fairville Asset Holdings, Greenbridge Management LLC, Crestline Capital Partners. He ran them through the business registry database he maintained access to for due diligence purposes. Fairville Asset Holdings, registered in Delaware 18 months ago. Sole director, a name he didn't recognize. Registered agent, a law firm in Wilmington he had never heard of, Greenbridge Management LLC, registered in Nevada 22 months ago. Sole director, the same name he didn't recognize. Same law firm, Crestline Capital Partners, registered in Wyoming 16 months ago. Sole director, he stopped. The sole director of Crestline Capital Partners was a man named Garrett Voss. Daniel knew that name. Garrett Voss was Renee's cousin. He had met him 4 times at family functions, a compact, watchful man in his late 30s who worked in financial consulting, which in Daniel's experience was either entirely legitimate or the most flexible description in the professional lexicon. At each of those 4 meetings, Garrett Voss had been attentive to Renee in a way that Daniel had attributed to familial closeness, and now, at 3:47 a.m., was reconsidering. He picked up his phone and called the one person he trusted with this kind of problem. Vincent Addo had been a senior investigator with the Financial Crimes Unit of the National Police for 11 years before a jurisdictional dispute, and a principled resignation had made him available for private work. He was 51, unhurried, meticulous, and entirely without sentimentality about human nature's capacity for betrayal, which made him useful in situations like this one. He answered on the 3rd ring, which Daniel found both impressive and slightly concerning. "Daniel, it's 4 a.m. I know. Are you available? A pause. For you, yes." What happened? Daniel told him. He gave Vincent the 3 company names, the transfer amounts, the timeline, the name Garrett Voss. He told him about the pantry lock and the tool shed and the bread roll and his mother's 7 months, because Vincent needed the full picture to understand the weight of what Daniel was asking. Vincent was quiet for a long moment when Daniel finished. "The transfers, total amount, I'm still calculating. North of $3 million from the personal accounts. The household account diversion is closer to $900,000. There may be more I haven't found yet." "There's more," Vincent said with the certainty of professional experience. "There's always more. The entities you found are the visible layer. I'll look for the ones underneath." He paused. "Daniel, your mother, is she safe tonight?" "She's in the house." "She's safe. Keep it that way. Don't change anything else. Don't move money. Don't confront anyone. Don't change your behavior in any way. Can you do that?" Daniel looked at the financial records spread across his study desk. He thought about Renee sleeping upstairs in their bedroom while he sat in this room and looked at $3 million of carefully structured theft. "I can do that," he said. "I'll call you at 9, Vincent said. "Don't touch anything until then." Vincent called at 8:45. "The 3 companies are a front layer," he said, without preamble. "Behind each one is a second entity that receives the cleared funds and holds them as investment assets. I've traced the beneficial ownership through 2 jurisdictions. The ultimate owner of all 3 second-layer entities is the same individual. Garrett Voss," Daniel said, "registered through a trust structure in the Cayman Islands." But Vincent paused in a way that had weight. "The Cayman Trust was established 4 years ago. 3 months before your marriage." Daniel was very still. "He built the infrastructure before the wedding," Vincent said. "The entities, the trust, the receiving accounts. All of it was in place before you married Renee. The first transfers didn't happen until 14 months ago, but the architecture was built at the beginning." Another pause. "This was not an opportunistic scheme. This was planned." Implications of this arranged themselves in Daniel's mind with the clean, merciless logic of a well-constructed financial model. Total exposure asked. At current count, $4.8 million. But the Wyoming entity has a secondary account I'm still tracing. I'll have the full number by end of day." Vincent paused again. "There's one more thing. Your mother's allowance, the monthly household allotment you set up for her personal expenses. What about it? It's been redirected for the last 8 months. The standing order was modified subtly, a routing change that would only be visible if you were specifically looking for it. Her allowance has been going into a subaccount of the Fairville entity." Daniel set the phone down for exactly 1 second. Then he picked it up again. "There's nothing," he said. "That's why she was in the tool shed. She has genuinely had nothing for 8 months. I'm sorry," Vincent said. "Yes." The tectonic shift of the night before moved again, deeper this time. Daniel sat at his desk in the morning light and felt it complete itself, the transformation of something that had been warm into something that was now simply, efficiently cold. Build the case, he said. Complete. Airtight. Every entity, every transfer, every document. I want it ready in 2 weeks. I'll need access to your financial record. You have it. Everything. Daniel looked at the study door. Vincent. 2 weeks. Not a day longer. Chapter 3. The calm before the storm. Breakfast the next morning was served at 8. Renee came downstairs at 7:50 in a white linen set that she'd bought on the Paris trip in August, which Daniel had not taken with her. She looked the way she always looked, composed, lovely, the particular beauty of a woman who has invested significantly in its maintenance, and she kissed him on the cheek and said, "You're home early," with an inflection that managed to combine welcome and inconvenience in a single phrase. Flight changed, Daniel said. His mother was already at the table. Renee's face moved through something brief and controlled when she saw Grace, a micro-expression of adjustment, the look of someone recalculating the geometry of a room they had believed contained fewer people. "Grace," she said, with the specific warmth of a woman who has been performing warmth long enough that it no longer requires conscious effort. "You're up early." "I slept well," Grace said, and looked at her son, and there passed between them a communication containing several complete sentences that used none of the available words. Daniel watched Renee serve herself from the breakfast spread and sit at the head of the table opposite him and take out her phone and scroll, and he thought, 4 years. I have been in this house for 4 years and shared this table for 4 years, and there is a trust in the Cayman Islands that was established 3 months before I put a ring on your finger. He thought about the bread roll. He spread butter on his toast with complete equanimity. "I'm going to be in the office this week," he said. "Late nights. The Singapore deal has follow-up work." "Of course," Renee said, without looking up from her phone. For 2 weeks, Daniel Osei lived inside the architecture of his own betrayal and dismantled it piece by piece while smiling at the dinner table. It required a specific kind of performance, not false happiness, which would have been both dishonest and exhausting, but rather the performance of preoccupied normalcy, of a man absorbed in business who is present at home only in the distracted, perfunctory way that his wife had apparently long found acceptable. He was good at this because it was, he realized with some bitterness, not entirely different from how he had actually behaved in the marriage. He had been distracted. He had been perfunctory. He had funded the household and traveled and built the company and assumed the architecture of home was sound because he had not looked at it closely enough. He looked at it now. He watched Renee's phone calls, not the content, but the pattern. Twice daily, mid-morning and late evening, calls of 12 to 18 minutes. Always to the same number, which Vincent's contact confirmed was registered to Garrett Voss. He watched the way Renee's posture changed when those calls ended, the particular relaxation of someone who has reported in and been approved. He watched her manage the household with the efficient authority of someone who had been running it as her own operation for some time. He watched her manage his mother. Not cruelly, that was the sophisticated part of it. Renee was never overtly cruel to Grace. She was managing, in the way of someone who has identified a nuisance and developed a system to contain it. The pantry lock was a budget measure. Grace's room was being refreshed, and therefore not quite right for guests, which meant his mother had been given a room at the far end of the east wing with no sitting room and poor heating. Meals were served in the main dining room, but somehow the timing always meant Grace ate either before or after, rarely with the household. She was present and invisible, acknowledged when unavoidable, managed into irrelevance the rest of the time. Daniel observed all of this and filed it and ate his dinners and answered his emails and went to bed each night next to a woman he had trusted with his mother's welfare and who had used that trust as a financial opportunity. On the 7th night, lying in the dark, he thought about what his mother had looked like on that gardening crate. The thin cardigan. The shame. 7 months, he thought. She sat in that shed for 7 months and didn't call me because she didn't want to be a burden. He thought about the word burden and how it had been installed in his mother not by her own nature, which was generous and strong and entirely without self-pity, but by the architecture of this house, this marriage, These 2 weeks that he was now dismantling, he thought. You are going to lose everything you built here. Both of you. Every shell company, every routing number, every dollar. And then you are going to leave my mother's house. He turned over and went asleep. He had built an empire on disciplined focus. He knew how to wait. On the 12th day, Vincent called. Total confirmed theft. $6,200,000, Vincent said. That's across all layers. There may be a final tranche I'm still confirming in the second Wyoming account, which would bring it to approximately 6.8. Documentation complete. Wire records, corporate filings, the trust instrument, signature comparisons. 3 of the authorization signatures on the transfer documentation are forged. I have a handwriting expert who has given a formal written opinion. A pause. Daniel, I also have something else. Tell me. Garrett Voss has a prior. 7 years ago in another state. A similar scheme, he targeted a wealthy woman, built a financial infrastructure around her household accounts, extracted approximately $2 million over 3 years. The victim settled civilly rather than pressing criminal charges. The settlement is sealed, but the civil filing is public record. Another pause. He's done this before. Your marriage was not the first time. Daniel was quiet. Does Renee know about the asked? Unknown. She may be a full partner in the scheme, or she may have been recruited as an access vehicle by someone who knew exactly how to use her. Vincent's voice was careful. That distinction may matter to you. It doesn't change the legal picture. Daniel thought about this honestly. He thought about 4 years of evenings at this table, and the Paris trip, and the way Renee had kissed him this morning with the practiced ease of someone maintaining a useful relationship. He thought about whether she had been deceived by her cousin or whether she had opened the door for him willingly. He found that it didn't, in fact, change anything for him. Either way, his mother had eaten from a trash bag in a garden shed. It doesn't matter, he said. Are we ready? We're ready, Vincent said. Whenever you want to move. Chapter 4. The public unraveling chose a Sunday. Sunday because Renee had a standing arrangement on Sunday evening's dinner with her mother and 2 friends. A monthly fixture that she treated as non-negotiable. She would be relaxed. She would not be expecting anything from him except his usual Sunday evening distraction of reviewing the week's portfolio reports. More importantly, Sunday was when Garrett Voss came for dinner. This was something Daniel had learned in the second week of watching. Garrett came once a month on a Sunday, always when Daniel was traveling or expected to be late from the office. He came and ate dinner in Daniel's house and sat at Daniel's table and spent the evening. Daniel imagined, in the particular comfort of a man who believes himself to have been very clever. Daniel had rearranged his schedule. He was home by 5. He had made 3 calls before he came home. One to his attorney, Margaret Chow, who had been briefed on the full situation and was standing by. One to his head of security, a former federal agent named Paul Deng, who had 2 colleagues stationed discreetly in vehicles outside the gate, and one to Detective Vincent Addo, who was parked on the street outside in an unmarked car with the complete documentation file and the authority, if necessary, to make the afternoon very formal indeed. His mother was in her room. He had told her that morning quietly in the garden, "Tonight, Mama, stay in your room until I come for you. Everything is going to be different after tonight." She had looked at him with those steady eyes, the eyes that had gotten up every morning of his childhood and managed on almost nothing and never asked for anything it couldn't pay for, and she had said simply, "Okay, Daniel." And then, "Be careful." Daniel came through the front door at 5 o'clock and walked into the house. Garrett Voss arrived at 6:30. He was exactly as Daniel remembered, compact, watchful, expensively dressed in the specific way of men who have recently acquired the money for expensive clothes and have not yet learned to wear them as if they don't matter. He came through the front door with his hand already extended, his face assembling itself into the warm, familiar expression of a man among people who trust him. He stopped when he saw Daniel in the entrance hall. Something moved across his face very fast, a flicker of recalculation. Then the warm expression reassembled itself. "Daniel, I didn't know you'd be here." "I know," Daniel said. "Come in." Renee came in from the sitting room. She saw Daniel's face, and whatever she saw there, some quality in the stillness of it made her stop. She looked at Garrett. She looked back at Daniel, what she began. "Dinner first," Daniel said pleasantly. "I've asked the kitchen to set 3 places." They ate. It was the most remarkable meal of Daniel's life, remarkable for what it contained, which was the 3 of them at a table, eating food, exchanging sentences about nothing, while underneath the table's surface the complete documented architecture of what these 2 people had built against him sat in a file folder in his study upstairs. He watched Garrett manage his knife and fork with the studied ease of a performance. He watched Renee track him with peripheral attention, reading him for signals the way a person reads a landscape for weather. He gave them nothing. He was the calmest person at the table. When the plates were cleared, he stood. He went to his study. He came back with the file folder. He set it on the table between them. "Fairville Asset Holdings," he said. "Greenbridge Management, Crestline Capital Partners." He looked at Garrett. "The Cayman Trust. The Wyoming Secondary Account." He opened the folder and laid the first document on the table, the wire transfer records, 12 pages, organized chronologically. $6,200,000, extracted from my household and personal accounts over 14 months. Neither of them spoke. "The signatures on 3 of the transfer authorizations are forged," Daniel continued. "A forensic handwriting expert has confirmed this in writing. The forgeries are good professional grade. Which is interesting because it tells me this wasn't improvised. It was commissioned." He looked at Garrett steadily. "By someone with prior experience in exactly this kind of scheme. Which brings me to the civil filing in Maricopa County 7 years ago. The wealthy widow in Scottsdale. Different name, same architecture." Garrett's careful composure had been deteriorating in increments since the first company name. By the time Daniel said Scottsdale, the composure was gone entirely, replaced by the look of a man who has just understood that the room he thought he was controlling has had its exits locked. Renee had gone very pale. She started. "I need to ask you a direct question," Daniel said to her without heat. "And I need you to answer it truthfully because the answer affects what happens next." He held her eyes. "Did you recruit for this? Did you know what the accounts were for when you gave him access? Or did he tell you something else?" A silence. Renee looked at the table. She looked at Garrett. Something passed between them, not warmth, Daniel noted. Fear and resentment, and the specific dynamic of 2 people discovering that a shared crime feels very different when it's been found out. "He said it was tax efficiency," she said. Her voice was flat. "He said you were overexposed in personal accounts, that moving funds through holding entities was standard practice for people at your level. He said you'd approved it." A pause, barely audible. "He said you knew." "I didn't know," Daniel said. "I know," she said. "I know that now." He looked at her for a long moment. The question of what Renee had known, and when she had known, it was one he had been turning over for 2 weeks and had not resolved. He resolved it now. She had known enough. She had known something was being done that was not above board, and she had chosen the comfort and the plausible deniability over the question she should have asked. That was its own category of wrong, distinct from Garrett's but not nothing. "Margaret," he said. His attorney came through the study door, which she had been behind for the last 40 minutes with Paul Deng. She set 2 packets of documents on the table, one in front of Renee, one in front of Garrett. "Those are civil complaints," Daniel said. "Filed this morning. Your legal teams will have been contacted before you sit down to read them." He looked at Garrett. "Detective Addo is outside. Whether he comes in tonight or next week depends on the cooperation that happens in the next 24 hours. That is the only variable still available to you." Garrett looked at the civil complaint in front of him. He looked at Daniel. For a moment, something that might have been admiration, the specific, reluctant admiration of one professional for another, flickered across his face before it was replaced by the expression of a man calculating his options and finding the count short. "You have everything," Garrett said. "It wasn't a question." "Everything," Daniel confirmed. Paul Deng stepped forward. Chapter 5. The promise kept. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Garrett Voss, faced with the complete documentation Vincent Addo had assembled, and the knowledge that the Scottsdale civil filing was now part of the public record in the new case, cooperated substantially within the first week. His attorney negotiated a plea agreement that included full restitution of the confirmed $6,200,000, plus interest, plus the cost of the investigation, from the assets held in the Cayman Trust which, as it turned out, had been well maintained, the proceeds carefully invested and grown in the 2 years since the last major extraction. The recovered amount exceeded $7 million when the final accounting was completed. Margaret Chow filed criminal referrals on the forged signature counts. The Financial Crimes Unit, Vincent's former colleagues, who received his referral with what Vincent described as professional enthusiasm, opened a parallel investigation. Renee agreed to a settlement in the divorce proceedings. She had her own attorney, a competent one, who understood the liability landscape clearly enough to advise against contesting anything. The settlement was fair, which was Daniel's instruction to Margaret, not because he felt generous, but because he did not want to spend the next 3 years of his life in litigation over furniture and the Paris photographs. The house was not part of the settlement. The house had never been Renee's to negotiate with. 3 months after the Sunday dinner, Daniel sat with his mother in the study at a desk he had cleared of the financial documents that had covered it for 2 weeks, and he pushed a document across the surface to her. Grace Osei looked at it. It was a property deed, recently updated. The Fairbrook Hills estate. 4.5 acres, the main house, the gardens, the oak trees she had planted 12 years ago in the knowledge that trees take decades to reach their full height, and she intended to be here to see it. The name on the deed was hers. She looked at it for a long time. He watched her face go through several things, the comprehension, the weight of it, the history compressed into a piece of legal paper. Daniel, she said, it was always yours, he said. I was just the one who bought it. You were the reason for it. He leaned forward. I made you a promise in a kitchen in the East Side when I was 22 years old. I kept the first part of it. I didn't do a good enough job of keeping the rest. She looked up at him. I was not here enough, he said. I built the house and I put you in it, and I trusted the administration of your life to people I should have watched more carefully, and I am sorry for that. He paused. I am very sorry for the shed, Mama. Daniel let me say it. He held her eyes. You sat in that shed for 7 months and ate bread from a grocery bag, and you did not call me because you did not want to worry me. That is the most Grace Osei thing that has ever happened, and it is also something I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure never happens again. His mother pressed both hands flat on the deed. She looked at her name on the paper, Grace Edwoa Osei, and she looked at her son, and she said nothing for a while, in the way of someone for whom the thing that needs to be said exceeds the available words. Your father would be proud of you, she said finally. I learned from you, Daniel said. Both of you. She reached across the desk and took his hand. Her hands were warm now. The kitchen was warm. The house was warm. The East Wing room had been properly fitted with heating and a sitting room, and a reading chair positioned to catch the morning light, and the pantry had no lock. Outside the study window, the oak trees she had planted stood in their full October height, the leaves turning in the late afternoon light amber and copper, and the particular gold of things that have been growing quietly toward their full height for 12 years and have, at last, arrived. There was a thing Daniel did every morning in the weeks after, that he would not have described to anyone because it was private and small and therefore more real than most public things. Before his first call, before email, before the portfolio review or the Singapore follow-up or any of the machinery of the company that woke with him each morning at 6, he went to the kitchen. He made 2 cups of coffee strong, in the stovetop mocha pot he had bought because his mother had mentioned once in passing that she preferred stovetop coffee. He brought one to her room. He knocked and she called, "Come in," and he set the cup on her bedside table while she was still waking up, still in the particular benevolent dishevelment of morning, and they exchanged approximately 4 sentences about nothing, the weather, the garden, whatever she'd been reading, whether the oak nearest the path had dropped its leaves yet. 4 sentences most mornings. Sometimes fewer. It was the most important meeting of his day. He thought about the bread roll sometimes. Not always. He had deliberately not made it the defining image of this period of his life, because she would not have wanted that, and because the story did not end in the shed. The shed was the turn in the story, not the ending. The ending was morning light through east-facing windows, 2 cups of coffee, 4 sentences about the garden, his mother's name on a deed, a promise properly kept. 6 months later, at the Osei Capital annual function, an evening that Daniel had historically used for investor relations and had quietly converted into a foundation benefit for a community development initiative he'd named. Without announcement, the Grace Osei Fund, his mother wore the navy dress she'd bought herself with the first month of her restored and redirected allowance. She sat at the head table. She was introduced. The room stood. She looked out at 400 people on their feet and then looked at her son beside her, and she said, in the particular dry, warm voice that Daniel had understood since childhood was her highest register of feeling, "All this for the woman from the tool shed," Daniel said. "For the woman who planted the trees." She looked at him. He looked at her. And in the way of things that have traveled very far through very difficult terrain and arrived somewhere solid and permanent and genuinely safe, they were quiet together for a moment in the middle of the room, in the noise and the light. The oak trees were still growing. The promise was kept. Please subscribe, like, share, turn on notifications so you never miss a story. The ENDNEXT.